Johnny had always been smitten with a girl at his office, but unluckily for him, she was already seeing someone else. This really bugged Johnny, as he never found the courage to tell her how he felt. So one day, he decided to be a bit daring and approached her with a rather bold and cheeky question. "Hey, I'm aware you've got a boyfriend and all, but how about I offer you $100 to sleep with me?" The girl was quite taken aback by Johnny's blunt offer and immediately turned it down. But Johnny wasn't the kind of guy who gave up that easily. He tried to persuade her more by saying, "Look, it will be super quick. I'll just toss the money on the floor, you bend down to grab it, and by the time you stand up, it'll all be over." Despite Johnny's persistence, the girl wasn't swayed. However, she did find the situation somewhat amusing and was curious to see how far Johnny would go. So she told him, "Let me think about it a bit and talk it over with my boyfriend." Later on, she called her boyfriend and told him everything about Johnny's unusual offer. The boyfriend, who was quite a clever fellow, saw an opportunity to make a quick buck. He advised her, "Ask him for $200 instead. Trust me, he won't even have time to take his pants off by the time you're done collecting the money." Agreeing to this plan, she went back to Johnny and accepted his proposal, but with the new condition of $200. Half an hour ticked by, and the boyfriend was eagerly waiting for a call from his girlfriend. But nothing. After about 45 minutes, he couldn't wait any longer and decided to call her himself to find out what had happened. She responded, "Coins." I was on a lengthy flight and thought striking up a conversation with my seatmate might help the time fly by. However, my neighbor for this journey was a young girl, probably around 4 or 5 years old. I decided to give it a try and said, "Hello there. Would you like to chat to make this long flight seem shorter?" The little girl looked up from her coloring book and replied, "Okay, mister. What should we talk about?" I wanted to sound a bit clever, so I suggested, "How about we discuss the current state of world affairs?" She paused, glanced at me with a curious expression, put down her crayon, and agreed. "All right. But can I ask you something first?" "Of course, go ahead," I encouraged her. She thought for a moment and then asked, "When a horse goes to the bathroom, its poop is in long tubes. But when a sheep does the same, it's in little pellets. And when a cow goes, it's flat and round. Why is that?" I was taken aback. I had to admit, that's actually a really good question. I have no idea. The girl then looked at me and said, "Well, mister, how do you expect to talk about world affairs when you don't even know your crap?" A woman walked into a bar and immediately noticed a cowboy sitting with his feet up on a table. What caught her eye were his incredibly large feet. They were the biggest she'd ever seen. Feeling a bit playful, the woman approached the cowboy and asked him, "I've heard a rumor about men with big feet. Is it true?" The cowboy, with a confident smile, replied, "Sure is. Why don't you come back to my place, and I'll show you." Driven by curiosity, the woman decided to take him up on his offer and spent the night with him. The next day, when they crossed paths again, the woman approached the cowboy and handed him a $100 bill. The cowboy, pleasantly surprised, said with a big grin, "I'm flattered. It seems you really enjoy our time together." But the woman shook her head and replied, "Not really. Take this money and go buy yourself some smaller boots." One day, a man walked into a bar and ordered a martini. When the bartender served it, the man did something unusual. Before sipping his drink, he carefully took out the olive and placed it into a glass jar he had with him. Then, he ordered a second martini and repeated the same process, removing the olive and adding it to the jar. As the hour passed, the man continued ordering martinis, and each time, he would carefully transfer the olive from the drink to the jar. Eventually, after he had consumed quite a few martinis, The jar was filled with olives. The man, now visibly tipsy, staggered out of the bar with his jar of olives. Another customer, who had been watching this curious behavior, remarked, "Well, I've never seen anything as strange as that." The bartender nodded and replied, "Yeah, he used to come here all the time before he got married. Now he only shows up once a week when his wife needs a jar of olives." A couple once read an advertisement in the newspaper about a rooster named Kenny that was being sold for $100. Intrigued by the high price, they decided to call the seller to find out what made this rooster so special. The seller explained that Kenny was an exceptional rooster. He had the ability to fertilize every animal he encountered, and surprisingly, he could even talk from time to time. Curious, the couple decided to visit the farm to see Kenny in action. Upon their arrival, the farmer released Kenny from his cage. Without hesitation, Kenny dashed towards the hen house and promptly attended to all the hens. But he didn't stop there. He then sprinted to the pig pen, followed by the horse stable. He was unstoppable, leaving no animal unfertilized on the farm before the farmer finally managed to put him back in his cage. Impressed, the couple thought Kenny would be a great addition to their farm, not just for fertilizing the hens, but also as a unique conversation piece. They hadn't heard him talk yet, but they were hopeful. After bringing Kenny home, they let him out of his cage, and he repeated his enthusiastic routine. The couple decided not to watch and went inside their house for dinner and then to bed. The next morning, they went outside to check on Kenny, only to find him lying motionless in the middle of the yard, appearing to be dead, with buzzards circling above. Distraught but resigned, the man grabbed a bag and walked over to Kenny, lamenting, "What a shame! He must have exhausted himself to death." Just then, Kenny cracked open one eye and whispered, "Keep it down, they're getting closer." Four friends, all married, decided to go on a fishing trip together on a Saturday morning. They were out on the boat, enjoying the calm water, fishing, and sipping on some cold beers. As they relaxed, the conversation turned to what each of them had to do to get permission from their wives for this outing. The first man started, "You guys have no idea the lengths I had to go to be here this weekend." He sighed and continued, "I had to make a deal with my wife that I'll paint every single room in our house next weekend." The second man chimed in, "That's nothing compared to what I had to promise. I had to agree to build my wife a brand new deck around our pool." The third man laughed and said, "Both of you got off easy. I had to vow to my wife that I'd completely remodel our kitchen for her." As they shared their stories, they'd noticed that the fourth man in the group had been unusually quiet. Curious, they turned to him and asked, "You've been pretty quiet about your situation. What did you have to do to join us for this fishing trip? What's your story?" The fourth man looked at them and replied, "Well, my story is a bit different. I set my alarm for 5 in the morning. When it went off this morning, I gave my wife a playful slap on the butt and asked her, 'Fishing or hanky-panky?' And she just told me, 'Don't forget to wear sunscreen.'"